G'day everyone, how's it going? So, we are holed up at our relative's house for a couple of weeks, waiting to get our travel permits to head back up north. And we're doing a few little upgrades and repairs on the van. And since I had all my tools out of the storage, I thought I'd do a quick little video going through all the tools that we used to build our van. The tools that we carry in our van for day-to-day repairs, and also the tools that we use for all the electrical upgrades and work as well. So this is going to be a three-part series. So first of all, the tools that we use to build the van. Secondly, the tools that we use for the electrical system. And third, the tools that we carry or that we recommend to carry in your van at all times. All right, so starting up, the tools that we use to build a van in the first place. Now, I want to start off with safety equipment. This is the most important thing you can have in the van at all times and when you're doing a build. So the most important things are to protect your body. So to have ear protection is really important. So I found that a pair of muffs actually work really well compared to earplugs, just because they're more hygienic and they're easier to use and they're durable and they're comfortable and all the rest. They can sometimes have issues if you're wearing safety glasses and you have muffs and a mask and it all kind of builds up. In that case, it is a good idea to have earplugs. They're pretty handy to have. So your clear glasses, really handy to have. Goggles, tinted ones are good as well if you're doing work outdoors. And a bunch of good quality face masks, which obviously at the moment in the world is pretty hard to get your hands on, but I generally recommend to use a P2 grade mask just because it offers a high level of filtration. So if you're doing spray painting, or if you're doing sanding or cutting things and you need to make sure you're protecting yourself, these masks are really good to have. Even if you're just cutting wood or metal, it's good to have a mask that's going to protect you from breathing anything in. Good pair of gloves, any type of glove will do. You can get the gloves which have the little nitrile fingerprint sort of area on them. They're really good as well, like a good thin lightweight glove, so you still have a good level of dexterity. So these are the gloves that we now have in the van. They're a little bit more heavyweight, but they still do a good job in a pinch. And lastly, not really a piece of safety equipment, but I've included it with it, is a decent quality LED headlamp. Now, the reason being that it just helps that when you are going to little areas, you can see what you're doing. If you're underneath the van installing anything, you can see maybe if there's something leaking so it doesn't drop in your face. So it's a handy piece of equipment, not necessarily safety equipment, but I've put it in together because it is part of that package of face wear and head wear. So these are the most important things. When you're building your van, you want to have lighting, you want to have hand protection, you want to have face and lung protection, eye protection, and protect your ears. So that's it to start with. So the next batch of things that I recommend is measuring and marking tools. So first of all is something like this here, like a workbench or a table. We bought like a blow molded table with folding out legs so we could move it around and use it when we needed it, and when we didn't, we packed it away. So a good table, a good bench, a workspace, or at least actually a couple of them would be ideal. Secondly, you want something like this, like an 8-meter retractable tape measure. It's really important to have. This here is a line marker, like a chalk line marker. So it comes out, you mark it up. This sort of tool is really handy for when you're marking up lines on plywood. So you can mark up on each end, use a chalk string. It leaves a residue on the wood once you snap it. And then when you do the cut, you've actually got a line to follow. So something like this is really handy, especially when you're cutting sections of plywood out, or large flat panels. A little square is really handy as well to try, where possible, to get a sort of straight and square cuts and edges. Obviously everything in the van is curved and not square, so it has limited use in some circumstances, but generally you still want to try and get things as square and straight as possible. So these tools come in various shapes and sizes. This is a little compact one, and for 95% of jobs this works fine. And lastly, you want a couple of clamps, at least 2. We had about 6, and that was a good number when you're doing a van build. So this is just what we keep in the van now. I'm a big fan of the quick grips, just because you can kind of use them one-handed and they're easy to use. So yeah, I'm sold. I bought a multi-pack. I bought 6 of these. So I had 2 large ones, 2 medium ones, and then I had 2 small ones, and I found them really, really useful. So when you're cutting sections of plywood or composite panel or whatever, you can get your workbench, you know, put it on, clamp it in place, and then you can use tools, cut it, measure it, do whatever, and the piece isn't sliding around. So something like that, really important to have, and as many as you can get your hands on, ideally. Up next, we've got sort of a bunch of hand tools. So things like this, these are like vice grips. So I've got a standard sort of size one, and I've got a little like almost like a needle nose one here. These are really handy because they're like locking pliers. So they come out, and then you can adjust the little screw here, and you can lock them in and onto things. So I found these really handy when you just kind of need to have that sort of grip on something. If you're trying to remove a bolt that's seized, you can pull this out, lock it on, and get a little bit of purchase and remove it. You want to have a few other sort of pliers, so side cutters, nose plier, and then like a square plier. These you use for everything all the time, and it's really important to have a good set of pliers when you're doing a van build, and I keep these in the van at all times as well. Then you want a set of screwdrivers, so just a few different size flathead screwdrivers is really good, and to have a couple of Phillips head. Obviously you've got a few different sizes of the heads as well, so that's really important to have with you at all times. A claw hammer, and a mallet or a mallet attachment if you want to go that way. Don't use this that much, but there's always occasions when you need something to be able to pry something loose, pull something out of the way, or bang something in place, or if your build progress isn't going as well as you expected, you've always got that. And then you've got your cutting tools. So it's handy to have like a knife with you, just in case. I always keep one of these in my pocket. Either like a flick knife like this, or a box cutter. So something like this I'd keep in my pocket at all times. Box cutter, and I always have a little packet of spare blades. So this is really important, especially when you're cutting the composite panel, cutting core flute, marking lines and plywood. I use a box cutter all the time, sharpening pencils, whatever. So a knife and a box cutter, really handy to have. A good pair of scissors. Absolutely critical. Ideally, if you have a couple of pairs, because you'll probably end up losing them right when you need them, use a good sharp pair of scissors a lot. You use it for cutting heat shrink, for cutting tape off, all sorts of things. So having a good sharp pair of full-size scissors is really important. Don't try and do it with a dinky little pair. Go out and buy yourself a nice sharp, good sized pair of scissors, and ideally if they're on sale, buy 2 of them. Multi-tool, same thing. I always had something like this on hand in the glove box or in my pocket when doing the van build, and to this day, just because it's got a knife blade, it's got a few little tools, little LED torch, and most importantly, a little set of pliers, just when you lost the other pair or someone else is using the other pliers. And then a couple little miscellaneous things, a Sharpie pen, ideally a few Sharpie pens. Not shown here is a good workshop pencil. Grab a few of those and a few Sharpie pens, because you will lose them, and always when you need them. These are very important for marking things, writing on, the dimensions or lengths or whatever on materials as you build. You want to have a few of these in hand. Again, I'll just have these in my pocket or clipped to my pants. And then a Bic lighter. Really handy, especially for when you're doing heat shrink, especially when you're doing heat shrink. So having one of these on hand just means that you can quickly heat shrink something if you don't have the other tool in place. So that's it for those. Next up, we're talking about socket, bolt, fastener sort of tools. So a really important thing to start off with is a good set of ratcheting spanners. So they've got the little ratcheting piece on the inside there. These are really, really handy for accessing bolts and undoing bolts in little tight spaces and nooks. So have a good set of those in a variety of sizes is helpful, probably all the way down to at least 8mm, and then up to about 17 to 19mm is a good thing to do. For the larger size bolts, this isn't the first tool you should use, but just as a backup, you need a little bit more purchase or a larger bolt size. Adjustable spanner, sort of a mid-size or a large adjustable spanner, really good thing to have on hand. For the Sprinter van at least, there's a few of these sort of Torx bolts or E-bolts. So it's really handy to just have a set of these on hand in all the different sizes, just so if you come across anything, you will be able to take those bolts out. And then having a standard socket set as well. So just having these, I've got these in imperial and metric, and I've got a few different tools and arms and adapters. So depending on what sort of space I'm going into, what sort of size bolt, you know, if it's something small or if it's something larger, I've got different tools for the job. So you'll use these, and having a full set is handy because, you know, there will be times when you'll find one bolt that's a particular size, and not having it will just put a stop to your job completely. Having one of these 10mm extension sockets is really, really helpful as well. So I bought this separately to the kit, and I use this a lot, so I recommend that. The next thing that is really critical when you're doing a van build is all your gluing and sort of adhesive stuff. So you probably want a couple of these, like a caulking gun. The more you spend on them, the better they work and the more easy and comfortable they are to use. Cheap ones though, they cost about $5 to $10 and they do the job in a pinch. And then that way all your caulking supplies, so if you're doing like your lap sealant, like this stuff here on your roof fan, or if you're using silicone or an adhesive, you'll be able to do it. So I advise to have at least one of these. Ideally two is good to have in hand. Same thing, you seem to always lose them or drop them or something, and they're kind of a tool that you can't do without. And they are kind of prone, if you're using an old one, they are kind of prone to breaking as well. So it's good to have the spare ones, because, you know, if you want to get your roof fan installed and sealed up, you don't want to be waiting on going to the hardware store to buy a replacement one. So something like that, really good to have. A little hot glue gun, whether it's a plug-in one like this or like a cordless one. These are really helpful just for sort of miscellaneous jobs where you need to stick something on or hold something in place, whether permanently or temporarily. So I've found that I use this a lot, and even though we've only got like a little cheap inverter at the moment, a little 100-watt inverter, this is a very low power draw, so I can still run this from the battery through that inverter if we need to. And I have used this a couple of times. So yeah, a little glue gun with a packet of glue rods, really handy thing to have plenty of those on hand. And then it's not really a tool, but it's more just an example of all the things that you'll need in terms of adhering and sticking things together. So, you know, like some double-sided butyl tape. I've got a bunch of heavy-duty outdoor-grade double-sided tape here as well, electrical tape, surface prep spray, and then just a whole bunch of different adhesives. So there's lots of times where you need to stick things in place, and you want to have a little tub of different glues and different adhesives. This stuff here is probably worth making a good note. So it's the Loctite 243. This is the blue version, which is the mid-strength. There are two other versions of low strength and high strength. So you use this stuff to basically glue the threads of your bolts. It's really helpful because obviously your vehicle is going to vibrate and move around. So this will help stop bolts from coming undone on their own. So you put a couple of drops of this on the thread, let it dry, kind of tighten it up, and then it will actually stop those bolts from rattling loose. So grab yourself a bottle of this and make sure you use it on all the bolts and all the fasteners that you can. Just one little drop, so keep it in your pocket, put a couple of drops on, attach it on, and then that way there's a lower likelihood of it vibrating and rattling and coming apart while you're driving. Right, so now for the fun things. So these are basically all the tools that I use to build the van out. The only thing that I don't have here that's not shown is a heat gun. So a heat gun's really important for heat shrink, drying things out, warming things up, that sort of thing. Really handy to have. I use it a lot, but when we finished with the van build, I gave it away because I didn't really think I'd need to use it anymore, and I didn't have the space for it at the time. So I went with all cordless tools. The primary reason is that the new cordless tools are so compact, they're so powerful, and you can get larger battery packs for them and a quick rapid charge pack as well for the batteries. So I went with all cordless. They are a lot more expensive than a corded version, but they're a lot more convenient, especially with us because we were building in a like an outdoor car park and we didn't really have good access to a power point to use. So for us, cordless was the way to go. So the first thing is something like this, like a circular saw. Circular saw is really good for getting quick, easy, fast, straight cuts on plywood, composite panel. It's also really helpful if you switch the blade out, because you can get different types of blades, so thicker and thinner blades and you know, more sharper and closer together teeth for different types of cuts. I use the circular saw to trim and cut the aluminium extrusions as well. So this has been a really handy, helpful tool, especially when you have a couple of different blades on hand, and works really well, and it's pretty light and it's pretty easy to use. So that's been a good one. Second one in that series is a jigsaw. So a jigsaw cutter, same thing. So where the jigsaw really shines is when you're doing neat curved cuts, and also for doing quick straight cuts as well. The jigsaw also, same with the circular saw, does have a variety of blades, so you can get longer blades, you can get shorter blades, you can get really fine blades, you can get coarse blades for all different types of materials. So I found that the jigsaw is a really quick and safe way to cut aluminium angle when it was like a little offcut and a little bit extra, rather than risk with a circular saw it flicking up and getting caught in the saw blade. So a jigsaw is a really handy thing to have as well, and when it's cordless it's just so easy to use. So that's a definite thing that I would recommend at all times, and I have no regrets about it. It was expensive, but it's worked really well and it's helped make our van build a lot easier. So the next thing, standard drill driver. So something like this, again, you'd be insane to use a corded drill when you're doing a van build, just because this is so much easier to have on hand. It's lightweight. When you're climbing up on the roof and you're drilling holes on the roof to attach your awning or attach the solar panels, this is what you want to have in hand. And get yourself a good accessory kit as well for the drill. Get yourself a big packet of different drill bits, get lots of spare drill bits as well. You'll go through the 2 and 3 millimeter drill bits really quickly. So yeah, get a good drill, good cordless drill. Don't worry about the price, they're not very expensive. This thing here is a impact drill. So it has a little quick release bit on the top, so it's very easy to switch the attachments over. You can get attachments for the impact drill that will do just about anything. So these are really powerful at putting in screws and fasteners, just because they have an impact kind of mechanism. So when you're putting in big screws into metal or into wood, this will just drive it straight in. So it's really quick and really easy to use. And you can get attachments for them where you can use Tek screws, you can use bolts, you can use this to take off bolts and attach bolts. You can do a lot of different things. So same as the drill driver, it's lightweight, it's compact, they're readily available, relatively cheap for cordless, and I wouldn't go without one of these to do a van build. It'd be insane to use a corded version. This thing here, it's a Dremel rotary tool. There are other brands. This is a sort of tool that you might only reach for 2 or 3 times in a van build process, and that will be it. But it's a sort of tool where it will do a job that no other tool will be able to do. Basically, it spins at a high RPM. So this one does about 8,000 to 30,000 RPM. So it's a pretty fast, powerful little device. And you can get hundreds of different attachments for this. So you can get cutting, sanding, grinding, polishing, all sorts of little fittings and bits that attach onto the tool. And that means that when you've got that one little odd job or that one little thing that you're trying to cut or clear out or cut off, this is a tool to use. This will save you and make your life a lot easier. So definitely something that I recommend if you can get your hands on it. I was using a corded one for a while, but I traded this one with my brother-in-law and swapped it out. And got myself a cordless one, which I've really enjoyed having on hand. So Dremel, corded or cordless, ideally cordless because the same reasons with a drill, it's a lot more convenient. Get one of these, have as many different accessories and bits and attachments for it as you can, and this is the solution for challenging jobs where you don't really know how to go about solving something. The last thing in terms of tools is a little portable shop vac. So I actually just bought this. I didn't use this during the build. I only bought this a couple of months ago. I used a normal vacuum, like a household vacuum, during our build process. I wish I had something like this when I was doing the build process, simply because it's small, it's lightweight, it's cordless, it uses the same batteries through an adapter as my DeWalt tools, and it's really easy. It's got a couple of different nozzle attachments. So when you're working on the van, you're cutting and drilling and chopping and doing things, and you're leaving mess and metal shaving the side of the van, this is an easy way to quickly vacuum and clean it all up. So if you're planning to do a build, you don't have something like this, I would strongly suggest getting it. And don't be afraid about the different brands, because you can get adapters that will fit onto it. So I've got a little plastic adapter that will let me use a DeWalt battery with a Makita tool. So don't worry about that either. There's always a way to do it. They're about $25 on eBay, the adapter, so not an issue. And the final thing is a DC charger. Now this is also new, I only got this about a month ago. This will allow you to plug in and charge your tool batteries from the automotive or van power source. So obviously when you're doing a build at home and you have a household power supply, the wall chargers are going to be faster. But in terms of in the future, having one of these is really handy. Or if you're building a van in like a public car park like we were, the ability to plug it into the power source in the van and charge your tools. Okay, so that's it for now in terms of all the hand and power tools that we use for building our van. So as you saw, there's not that many, but there is a bit of an assortment, and it's a really, it's a bit of an investment. So if you're doing a van build for the first time, when you start looking at the price of buying all these tools, you might be a little bit overwhelmed, because they will add up to probably a couple of $1,000s. My advice is that a good tool is an investment. So, it might be a bit of an upfront payment, but you're going to get a lot of benefit from that over time, because it's going to be quicker, easy to use, more convenient, more accurate. It's going to give you a neater job. You're going to get the job finished easier and faster. It's worthwhile. If you are really, really hard up for money, I would recommend maybe hitting up friends and family, seeing if you can borrow tools responsibly from someone, or if you really have to, the corded tools are always going to be a lot more cheaper and inexpensive. So I would caution against going too cheap on tools as well. You can buy certain budget brands from, like department stores. I would probably advise against that. Hardware stores usually will have like a low to mid-range selection of power tools. They're not going to be as good as like a DeWalt or a Makita tool, but they're going to cost half the amount, or less than half the amount. So sometimes they can be a good option if you are really in a pinch and you're trying to do a build on a budget. That can be a good option. But yeah, I would generally recommend just to find the extra money, and if you can, invest that into a good set of tools. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. You're going to see me here wearing the same clothes, because I'm going to edit this, finish this up, and then I'm going to do a separate video talking about tools for the electrical system, just so it's not too much all in one video, it's not too overwhelming. And then I'll do another tool video, and I'll pull out all the tools that I would strongly advise to keep with you in your van at all times for repairs and upgrades and that sort of thing in the future. So stay tuned for those second and third parts. And until next time, I'll see you then. Thank you. Bye.